So I wanted to come on and talk about the Pope, which is not something that's on my bingo card. So the Pope's been saying the things that I think CEOs are paying consultants to tell them, but they're actually dancing around this. And it's kind of fascinating. So there is quite a long document that you can find on the Vatican website. Again, not on my bingo card. It's worth a read, or as I might show you later, it's perhaps worth putting it into Notebook LM so you can digest it in those bits in between meetings. So it's a rallying cry for how we should be thinking about AI for the common good. And I've been critical in the past about some of the tech bros speak about humans and humans in the loop, and my feeling that they've been dehumanizing the impact on jobs, the impact on people, and this is part of the cut and thrust of what is an incredibly well-researched piece of analysis and diagnosis coming out of the Vatican. So a few things that I liked that I wanted to draw your attention to. So there's a statement: building for the common good means accepting the limits and weaknesses of humanity without considering them an error to be corrected. So there's this idea that comes out of the tech bros, perhaps it reminds you if there's that meme about drink coffee, do things faster with stupid things faster with more energy. Perhaps use AI, do stupid things faster with more energy. But we're being guided to a what the Pope would call a deceitful goal, right? This aim that technology is going to save us from all our weaknesses. And perhaps that upgrading human is trying to upgrade something that isn't necessary, right? So our limits and our weaknesses are what makes us human, what makes it interesting to work with other people, what makes it fun, what gives you surprise and energy. So this kind of pursuit of unlimited upgrades for the humans is actually having a consequence that leaves people behind. It's a deceitful goal. It helps some people, but at the detriment of helping other people heal their wounds, get basic necessities in life. So it's just a really interesting thought piece. There's also a drive around work. So the Pope's view on work is, and I'm quoting again, work is not considered simply as a problem to be dealt with or a means of generating income, but a fundamental good for the person, a principle of economic activity, and the key to the entire societal question. And through work, people are bringing freedom, creativity, play, cooperating, contributing to culture, contributing to kind of morals of society. And there's a dignity in that and a participation in society. So I guess, a thought for me is just because AI can do something, should it? And just because one area goes away can be done more easily, more efficiently. We as leaders have an obligation to think about our workforce and think about our jobs and think about the organisation that we design to go along with it, and do that with thought and consideration. So there's this concept running through it about human dignity. If you compare and contrast that perhaps to when Sam Altman said about, it takes a lot of resources to invest in a baby and a human before they become an intelligent human being. Like, this is exactly this crux of the difference between a kind of technology capitalist view of the world and this ethical moral view of where society is going. You know, and again, I'll quote again, the tendency to let the logic of efficiency, control, and profit alone shape personal, social, and economic decisions. So my personal rule for some of this is to spend your money for the world you want to live in. So, you know, a binary choice there might be, do I go on Spotify and play AI generated music, or do I seek out artists? Do I go to gigs? Do I make sure I'm curating stuff that I really want to exist in the world and paying for that with my money? You know, there's so much more that is in this this analysis, really. And I just think it's a great strategic diagnosis. You can agree with it, not agree with it, but I think it's a provocation that is so absent at the moment from certainly what consultants are being asked to do. It's very much being glossed over. We end up on these like sort of technical discussions about the nature of intelligence rather than taking a kind of view of this is what humankind is great at. You know, these small things, these inefficiencies, they actually are the joy of life sometimes, versus the behavior of algorithms, and particularly around this human-like intelligence that we see these days from our LLM chatbots and those tools that we now have, versus what this actually is in terms of some data processing. And I guess the whole nature of how we learn as human beings, we learn by making mistakes, we learn from other people. That's not the same as the way that your AI harness is learning, right? And it's a form of statistics that's based on data and feedback it's given. So it's not neutral. So it's a really strong point in here about it is not at all neutral when you use one of these tools. And we need to remember that. It's not an arbiter of better decision making somehow. It's a product of what it's been trained on, fed, tweaked. And so it's in the Pope's words, a valuable tool that requires vigilance, which I really, really loved. Right. And if you're wondering about AI governance, by all means, come to me for a workshop, but also the governance section in here is so, so good. And particularly thinking about the ownership of data and how so much data is left solely in private hands, isn't really regulated at the moment. And, you know, why are we thinking of data as something to be sold off and entrusted to a select few private individuals? How can we think more creatively about our data being a common good, a shared asset, and people participating in it? Because there are monopolies around AI and monopolies around data that perhaps are fine on the one hand, but on the other hand, if we're now treating the human being as and a person as something that can be surpassed, should be surpassed, then implicitly you're kind of accepting that some lives are less useful, less desirable, less worthy, and they're somehow being sacrificed on the altar of progress. Apologies for using an accidental religious metaphor. You know, and the way we learn, if you've got an error in an algorithm, you want to correct it. If a person makes an error, then that, you know, they have the freedom to change the way they are, what they do. It's something quite different. And I'm going to quote you another bit again. I'm girling badly. When business models thrive on human weakness, the person is treated as a means rather than an end. Those who design or finance such systems bear a moral responsibility that cannot be ignored. So I think John Amici often says you can't be a part-time person of principle. So I think it's really, really interesting. And I would urge you in leadership team meetings, in board meetings, where you have a section on AI governance, make sure you're not glossing over this. There is a real tension and debate here. You want to set a process running that pulls out these dilemmas and these choices that you're making, rather than feeling like it's a tick box exercise and are you protected? The other thing I love about this document is it's so multifaceted. So it also talks about the supply chain, the labour that often goes into making these models work, low paid labour, watching horrendous content, categorising it, and talking about that as a new form of exploitation, new forms of slavery, right? There are moral challenges in here. And it's tempting to say this is too big and it's beyond us and this isn't something we should be grappling with. But there's a thought that we can be realistic about what we can do and the choices that we can make. And as organisations, we have that choice too. And we should be making that choice. We should be making choices about how we handle the databases, the data that we are gifted in the course of our business. We should talk about the way that we want to build workforces, not just assume we can save some cost, but really think about these things as to how a leader comes into the future. And that's going to require a bit of tension in the way that you work. Often leadership teams have some gaps. Oldie but goodie. I find myself going back to these old methods so often these days. Oldie but goodie, Lencioni, dysfunctions of a team, or Linda Hill, collective genius. You need to be able to sit with these tensions in your organisation, in your leadership team, to really understand what you want to be as an organisation, as a leader in this AI-driven world. And think about the most rewarding bit of your job. It's probably related to people and teams and making things happen. It's probably not related to the speed at which you can do a pivot table or make a PowerPoint, right? And there's this metaphor in this document about the Tower of Babel. So a tall tower built to reach for the gods, but they sort of lost the god even, but they'd lost their connection with society, versus Nehemiah building the New Jerusalem, which was consultative and collaborative and really involved everybody in it. So that's the metaphor that runs through the Pope's document. If you want to work through this with your leadership team, we have a workshop that we'll use to get you to debate not just ethical aspects, but also, governance, protection in an age of cyber attacks, and how you might protect your organisation and protect data, not just your kind of moral debates of it. But I think everyone needs to be grounded in this, because otherwise, who are we listening to? And my three bits of discourse about AI in the last week have been in the back of the joiners, which is a gig venue in Southampton with a band saying that they were really concerned about their future in an AI world. Also around this missive from the Pope. But over lunch yesterday in an Italian restaurant, talking about what this means for young people and creativity and the future of work for the next generation. So it's part of what we're all doing is involving ourselves in this. So anyway, not on my bingo card. Didn't think that the Pope would be the one issuing one of the best kind of analyses of the issues that we have in our AI world and what we might do about them. And it'd be lovely to see some of this flowing through into political discourse and regulation. And if you're looking for help on that, I would love to work with you on that. See you in the next one.